Hey, how are you doing? It's Alan here from Look for Warriors, and I want to talk really quickly about Tom Cowan and Andy Kaufman. And before I do that, really quick shout out to, I think it's Stephen Lovett, who gave me some great information about Tom Cowan, and also, I have to read this one, I'm sorry, I have to read this one. Irang Santeri, I'm probably saying that completely wrong, but thank you. He gave me a lot of really good information about Tom Cowan to look up, and Andy Kaufman, which I wasn't actually aware of, but he gave me some good information about Andy Kaufman as well. So I listened to some of his stuff and some of his stuff with Tom Cowan, and one thing really jumped out to me. So just thank you. I'm so glad to have great, intelligent subscribers who are going to give me these kind of tips, and I'm so glad that you guys take the time to put in comments that I can respond to, I can read, I can research, and I can respond to. So thank you so much. And if you also would like to put in a comment, I'd really appreciate that. Just put it in the comments below, because it really helps me out. And also hit subscribe. I'll do it really quickly now. Hit subscribe and hit like. But when I was taking a look at Andy Kaufman and Tom Cowan, one thing really jumped out to me, which was he made the statement. Culture doesn't allow us to develop our intuition. Culture doesn't allow us to develop our intuition. And I would take that one step further. That's what Tom Cowan and Andy Kaufman were saying. But I would take it one step further, that education inhibits us developing our intuition. Education or schooling, probably better said schooling. Schooling inhibits us on developing our intuition. And anything new, anything creative, any invention, anything that's created from the ground up, not something copied. You know, you can have a business and you can copy that exact business. But anything new, exciting, or something created from the ground up, doesn't come from us, doesn't come from me, doesn't come from you, I'm going to say. It comes from the ether. It comes from God, the ether, whatever you want to, Allah, whatever you want to call it. But it comes from outside of us. That's what intuition is. And schooling inhibits our ability to connect with our intuition, to connect with the infinite, to connect with God, to connect with everything outside of us. The unconscious, you could say, you could call it the unconscious. Because Tom Cowan said something really interesting, and I had to laugh. He said that there's two things. First of all, he said that anytime he's being wrong in his books, he said he looked at some of his books in the past, and some of them make him cringe, which I understand. I've looked at videos in the past, probably this one maybe, it's made me cringe. But he said anytime he's been wrong, it has been because he believed the mainstream narrative too much. That he kind of had this thought in his head that, well, everybody thinks this, so it must be right. Everybody thinks this, so it must be right. And every time he's thought that, he's been wrong, is what he says. Every time. And they're the things he regrets in his books, the things that where he didn't connect into his intuition. He just took what everybody thought was correct. He's been wrong those times. And he made this sort of statement as well, which is really interesting. He says, he'd just be talking to his wife, and his wife said, well, where did you come up with all of this? And he said, well, I came up with it. I didn't find it at somewhere. I came up with it. No one else is crazy enough to think like this. This is what Tom Cowan said in this conversation with Andy Kaufman. Nobody else is crazy enough to think like this. Nobody. And I believe him. And you know where else? Nobody was crazy enough to think like Einstein. Nobody was crazy enough to think like Einstein. At the time, what Einstein's projections went right outside settled scientific belief at the time. Newton's laws were settled science. All the scientists agreed that Newton was right. But Einstein said if you look in a different way, at a different level, all that goes out the window. All that goes out the window. If you look at a different level, all of Newton's laws go out the window. Now, it doesn't mean we aren't still interested in Newton and we don't still study Newton. It doesn't mean the apples have stopped falling from trees. But Einstein was also right. Einstein was also right. So sometimes settled science isn't looking at it at the right level. There's other levels to look at it. And they can both, Newton and Einstein, even though they're contradictory at parts, they can both be correct and they can both live beside each other in the same book and both be correct. And when we say settled science, it's very, very dangerous to say settled science. So no one's allowed to question this now. All the scientists agree. What I used to be told sometimes, I suppose you know better than every scientist in the world. And no, I don't. I don't know better than every scientist in the world. But I do know that there's no such thing as settled science. I do know when you tell people to stop asking questions, we're in a bad place. I do know that we're in a schooling system that teaches everything as if they're facts. These are just facts. Just remember them and regurgitate them. That's wrong. The way to say these are our best guess right now. These are theories we have. But we don't know everything, and we rely on you. You kids growing up, we rely on you to study this more and come up with it, connect to your intuition and come up with the new stuff that's going to take us a leap forward. It's not just going to be a company that's copied another company, but it's going to be a company that's a leap forward, completely new. Or it's going to be science that's a leap forward, completely new, that's come from somewhere else. So Tom Cowan says that every time he's believed the mainstream narrative too much, he's been wrong. He said that no one else is crazy enough to think like he does. Do you know who else wasn't crazy enough? No one else was crazy enough to think like. Do you know who else? Tesla. Nikola Tesla. No one else was crazy enough to think like Nikola Tesla. When you take the current that he created, if we had went with the current that the inventor of the light bulb created, we would have had to have power stations in every single town. The Tesla's idea was crazy because the actual current was way, way too high, but he found a way to bring it down and bring it down and bring it down, but it could travel over a longer period. And no one else was crazy enough. So Edison, to show how dangerous Tesla's invention was for electricity, used it on the electric chair that killed people. But Tesla was crazy enough to think that he could take this unbelievable current that could travel and send it to every town with very few power stations. So there's a power station for a city of a couple of million people. No one else was crazy enough to think like Tesla. No one else was crazy enough to think like Einstein. Nobody else is crazy enough to think like David Icke. No one else is crazy enough to think like Tom Cowan. And I'm hoping that nobody else is going to be crazy enough to think like you. Think like you. So you'll be what Steve Jobs talked about, the crazy ones. The square pegs in the round holes. Stay crazy. Be crazy enough. Be crazy enough to not think like the mainstream. Be crazy enough to connect to your intuition, to learn how to connect to your intuition. You start that just with meditation or prayer or whatever you want to call it. And be crazy enough to bring the next incredible invention that's going to make my life better. It's going to make my life better. Be crazy enough to create that next incredible invention, which is a leap forward. Even if it takes you 80 years, it's a leap forward of what anyone else has done. We need you. We need the crazy ones. This has been Alan here from Look for Warriors. I want you The most crazy thing you can do right now is hit subscribe and hit like and put in a comment. Tell me, I've probably left someone else. I'm talking about Tom Cowan, I'm talking about Nikola Tesla, I'm talking about Steve Jobs, I'm talking about you, and I'm talking about Einstein. Who have I left out? Put in a comment to let me know who I've left out of the list.